We, in part, are hosting this webinar and one next week on Tuesday to acknowledge the publication of a big recent study on youth mental health. And um, this is from an article that was published a couple years ago, but the short version is young people, and these surveys generally look at folks who are in the 16 to 25 range. Um, it's harder to work with younger students, but young folks are feeling the weight of climate change, and it often is affecting their mental health. This is from the most recent study that was published last week. And I know you might need to kind of squint to see all of those states and find yours and take a closer look at exactly what's going on. But the short version is when we look at the United States specifically, over half of the youth surveyed say that they're either very or extremely worried about climate change. And if you look on the other side, very, very few say they're not at all worried about it. So we know that this is happening. We know it's having impact. And in thinking about how to respond, I look to some other recent research. If we're going to really look at overwhelm, grief, anxiety, and how to address it, um, one of my favorite ideas is presented by Maria Oyala, who did a webinar with us a couple weeks ago, and really looking at hope theory, in which hope is not an abstract concept, but it's a combination of knowing that there is some way to address the concerns, that there is a way to get there, and that we have power to move in that direction. Um, in addition to that hope, we also need the skills and tools to address those emotions and acknowledge them and work through them. And a lot of studies point to the fact that agency and action is really important to overcome a sense of hopelessness. Um, there's something really interesting happening on the big picture climate education scale in the United States that gets at this addressing the broader picture, enabling youth to communicate and engage and create agency. The new NOAA climate literacy principles were updated and published, oh, just a couple months ago now. And the changes from the old literacy principles are really important. The top are the 2009 and the bottom here, the 2024. And this is a document that a lot of um, policymakers, educators, um, and outreach professionals look to consider and discuss climate change. And instead of just saying a climate literacy literate person can understand the principles of Earth's climate system, they've updated that to say they can also address the issues that they see. Instead of just recognizing, they know where to find good information and how to access it. Instead of just communicating, it's communicating in accurate and effective ways. And that effective way is like communicating in a way that makes sense of what they're saying and also has the power to affect change in the way that I read it. And finally, is able, without tiptoeing around it as they did in 2009, um, in this language of responsible decisions with regard to actions that may affect climate, it switched to make informed decisions related to climate change. This switch is really powerful because it helps ground climate education in the US to address those mental health and overwhelm challenges that were highlighted in those studies. A brief glance at the old principles that were associated with that old climate literacy guide. Um, the first four here are about climate science, saying we know where energy is coming from. We know what happens when it gets here. It impacts us and is impacted by life, and it varies. And we know all this because we can model that. We know we're affecting it from the human side, and that impact will have consequences. But in this old set of climate literacy principles, this guiding principle was set off to the side to say that humans can really take action to reduce climate change. And instead of being set off to the side, in the new principles, that idea is really woven throughout. We switched to acknowledging that modeling and observing climate change, yeah, we've got the tools to do that, and centering greenhouse gas as the main cause here, and not talking about the annual cycle so much, or uh, using these to address skeptical arguments, but really pinpointing it's greenhouse gas caused by burning of fossil fuels that humans did. And that warming is going to have pretty drastic effects. But the new principles do really cool things because they introduce climate justice as part of the picture for climate education. They separate out adaptation and mitigation and acknowledge that both are important and we have to engage right now to move forward. And this is a really cool principle because it addresses that hope and agency aspect. It has that future goal to say we can absolutely move forward effectively. That sustainable future is very possible, and we need to start now, including justice, to really move forward effectively. So this new set of climate literacy principles and the change in definition of what a climate literate person is able to do helps ground current climate education efforts. And rather than stick to my slide, I want to offer a set of tools developed by the Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network, CLEAN, um, that we use to navigate those realms. In our teaching climate and energy section of the webpage, there's this new addressing climate change section, which highlights those 8 principles. Any one of these principles you can dive further in, and it will have thoughts on how to bring those ideas into your classroom and resources for middle and high school at this point. These pages are brand new to match those brand new literacy principles, and we'll continue to add more resources to them and more teacher support um, in the next few months. But they already have a lot here to provide um, support for both educators and students. So please take some time to investigate these addressing climate changes and addressing climate pages, which are in this guidance and teaching about climate and energy section. Another piece of this that I want to highlight is in this toolkit, which you can get through teaching climate and energy and going to the toolkit, or you can scroll down to on the side. And that is our climate mental health pages. The climate mental health pages have a couple different pieces to them. There are these strategies that really ground ideas in how to navigate climate mental health from a lot of different approaches. And they start with self-care, making sure that those folks involved in this effort, whether student or teacher, are attending to their own health as we're working to move forward in the broader system. Um, Climate justice is highlighted directly in the literacy principles and an essential part of this picture. Something that research has also really pushed forward is that youth want to have discussions with their families, friends, and communities about these feelings around climate change. And many of these strategies involve helping youth to have those conversations and navigate them. In addition to our climate mental health resources, we have a set of activities that range from 5 minutes to about an hour to help educators navigate this with their classes. So please explore this activity guide. The activities are listed right there, and this covers all grade levels K through 12 and could also definitely be used with adults, as I have done in multiple conferences and discussions. in addition to the addressing climate pages and this climate mental health set of resources, I also want to highlight the National Climate Assessment Educator's Guide, which we published just this summer in coordination with the release of the National Climate Assessment, the fifth National Climate Assessment. It's important to note that the fifth National Climate Assessment features the most up-to-date and recent science around climate change. So when we're looking at the assessment and how to explore it through these resources, this is what can help inform where things are at in a specific region, what the specific challenges are, and how to navigate those challenges. For instance, this one in the Southwest really looks at the region's coast and oceans and some specific regional impacts like the fiber industry here, um, the way that climate change impacts human health in this region, and drought in the Southwest. Um, so each of these areas paints the picture, but also offers ways to navigate it. So the National Climate Assessment Educator's Guide is here for you to explore. Check out your own region there. And as part of this, for each of the regions, we had associated climate actions. Um, these pathways to action are classroom level, so they really look at what is pertinent and possible in a specific region, which case studies from the Climate Resiliency Toolkit can help us to look at that, and what actions are doable on a classroom level. Finally, as we're looking at how to navigate all of these challenges and help youth find that sense of agency, a part of that is creating a systems perspective. And instead of just looking at climate change in science, looking at it across subjects in a way that allows students to think about how action might look in regard to their community and all the different areas that action might touch. And to do that, um, we started with these four subjects, but you can really teach climate change in any subject. And thinking about how to do that, it mainly asks that you take what you're currently doing and focus those skills on climate change. For instance, in social studies, looking at civics and city planning, instead of just looking at that and how past cities were built, pivoting to planning climate resilient studies is a great example of navigating teaching across the curriculum from a social studies perspective. So we feel that with the new addressing climate pages, the mental health resources, the National Climate Assessment Educator's Guide, and these teaching across the curriculum pages, we have a lot to offer to support hope and agency for youth and to respond to some of these recent studies looking at where youth are at and what's needed. That covered a lot of ground, and I'm glad to revisit any of it or discuss how it might be useful for you. Um, but with that part of it, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and we can move into a discussion style.